Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from Fractal Universe, the Impassable Horizon, now June 25th on Metal Blade Records. This album has 11 tracks, 53 minutes in length, and this is the band's third full-length studio album. They are a French prog technical death metal band. Now this is a concept record, nothing new to the band, but the concept on this album is death and how we as humans deal with that impending doom, or that impassable horizon, if you will. Now the overall fluidity of this album is really good. For a record that has 11 tracks, 53 minutes in length, you have to make sure that this album flows. You have to make sure that this album has continuity from track to track, that the songs are balanced, that the overall design of the record is balanced, and you don't feel like there's a break here or there. You want the album to feel as continuous as possible while giving you different approaches in different directions from song to song. And that's exactly what you're going to get out of this structure, out of this track listing. The other aspect that I felt about the overall way in which this album is presented and in which this album is designed is that it gives you two different possibilities of digesting it. You can skim it off the top just by pressing play, sitting back, allowing the album to do all the work, and you kind of just lose yourself in it and you navigate through the album very smoothly, and by the time it's over, you almost didn't realize that you went through 11 songs. Or you can dive a little bit deeper and really try to get to the meat and bones of each and every single track, in terms of the concept, in terms of the lyrics, in terms of the overall soundscape, all the different layers that are there. You can try to break them down on the individual basis before you move on to the next song. So this album is going to give you exactly what you put in. And what you put in is what you're going to get out. The more work you put into the record, the more pleasure perhaps you're going to get out of it. If you just want to enjoy it and press play, you can also do that. It's an album that really offers two different sides of the exact same coin. Once you get into the soundscape, this album is super rich. This is definitely the beacon of the record. I love the sound. I love how it permeates. I love how it stretches out, but it has so much thickness to it. There's so many moving pieces. The perfect thing about it is that all these pieces are moving in the same direction, so there's never a conflict in between the different elements. This allows the sound to feel a little bit more robust, a little bit bigger, not necessarily heavier, but just a little bit bigger, and create a little bit more sense of volume and presence that makes the album feel more impactful from the get-go all the way to the end. Within that sound, there are three elements that I felt were very important to create that atmosphere, to create that soundscape: the saxophone, the drums, and the guitars. Now, the saxophone is interesting because there's always that fear, at least from my side, that they're going to use it almost as a cameo or as a gimmick in one song and then that's it. Also, there's the fear that you're going to overuse it too much and then it becomes a little bit redundant. And by the time you reach song number 7 or song number 8 and you hear the saxophone again, you feel like you've heard it already before, so it's nothing new, so it doesn't add any spice to the track. On this record, they used it just the right amount. It's a really hard line to walk because you don't want to underuse it and you don't want to overuse it. They use it sporadically throughout the album, so every time that it came on, you had a sense of comfort in it because you heard it before, but it was being presented to you in a different format, in a different place within the song, and really giving some added value to the track itself. So it never really felt as a gimmick, and at the same time, it didn't feel like it was being overused, just the right amount. On the other hand, you have the drums. The drums offer some consistency, but also some diversity. It's not a one-size-fits-all from the first to the last song as far as the drum goes. Sometimes they're a little bit heavier, sometimes they're a little bit more aggressive, but they also allow the songs to catch their breath a little bit. They also bring a little bit of a jazzy vibe into the overall soundscape. They also ground the record. They do a lot of different things throughout this album. They really have different roles, if you will, within each and every single song, which allows them to have a little bit of versatility, but at the same time, the way they sound, the way they come across is always very consistent, always very warm. The same could be said for the guitars. The guitars on this album are just incredible. I love everything about the guitar sound, the presentation, and the execution. I wouldn't say that they're a beacon within the record or within the soundscape of the album, because I really feel like this is a record that you have to take the sound as a whole, all the elements working together. That's what makes this album special. There's not one single element that makes it special. It's the combination of elements that really allows this album to be as strong as it is. But you have to give some credit to the guitars because they really help you, or at least they guide you through the experience on each and every single song, kind of becoming your roadmap, if you will, from the starting point all the way to that finish line. On top of it all, you have the vocals. I felt that the vocal style, the vocal range between clean and harsh vocals was really important to emphasize the moments and to emphasize the concept and what they were trying to achieve. goes back to that point that I made earlier about two sides of the same coin. That's very well represented in the vocal approach and the vocal range within this album. I was a bigger fan of the clean vocals because I felt that they were very haunting, they were beautiful, they carried melody, but they carried a lot of darkness in that melody. But when you get the harsh vocals coming out, there's a sense of an outburst, there's a sense of exteriorizing all the energy that's being built up on the inside. So it's a necessary evil within the record in order to create the yin and the yang. That's what this album kind of becomes all about as far as your experiences as you navigate through it. Overall, I really like this album. I really like the sound. The sound is just really well produced, really well recorded, really well presented. Like I said, there's so many layers on this album. It's really hard to create an album that gives you a sense of substance, but at the same time allows you to break down all the individuality of the elements. This album does that for you. The only issue that I have with this record is perhaps the length of the album. For a record that I like to dive deep into it, and I don't want to just skim it off the top, I really want to go into the nitty-gritty of each and every single song. It felt a little bit cumbersome by the time you reach the tail end of the album. You feel like what they had to give you, it's already been given, and there's a little bit of a sense that you've been there before. There's a sense of coming full circle, but still with some songs left on the record. So if this album was perhaps 10 minutes shorter, I think the impact and the overall playability would be a lot higher, because you would still feel like you have more to get out of it, and that would come back, you would come back for more. In this case, by the end of the record, if you're not skimming off the top, if you're really diving deep, by the end of the record you feel a little bit burnt out. You feel like you've gone through the ringer a little bit, because it's an album, like I said, it has a lot of layers, there's a lot of things for you to process. So to me, that is the only real negative that this album has to offer, is it overextends itself. Sometimes there's too much of a good thing. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Autopoiesis. Opening track on the record, the guitars and drums are just absolutely awesome. They really lay the groundwork, not just for this song, but what the record is going to have in store for the listener. This blend approach of melody and aggression really coming to life on this track, both musically and vocally. You really see that dynamic existing in those two separate worlds. The vocals on this song really help propel the track, but the overall guitar work is just magnificent. And then when you sprinkle in some keyboards here and there, it adds more elements, it adds more sound, it adds more melody, it adds more layers. It just allows the song to feel slightly more complete. Next, Interfering Spherical Scenes, my favorite song on the record. The clean vocals are just haunting on this track, just absolutely haunting. The melody, the progression between verses and chorus is phenomenal. There's a sense of build-up. You feel like the song is going somewhere through those verses, and you can't wait to get to that chorus, because that's going to be the moment where everything comes into the outside. So the overall track has this sense of growth, but the vocals and the melody really gives it a dark, haunting feel. The harsh vocals at the midpoint really resets the song. It resets your brain, it resets how you perceive this track, and it's really a nice little touch, because it brings some melody out of the brutality that it has, and it brings some brutality out of the melody that the track had before. So it's a point in time where you see these two worlds colliding, but not necessarily breaking apart. So it's an interesting moment within the track. It resets the song, it allows the song to have a feeling of coming full circle afterwards, but it's really an interesting part. Otherwise the song would be too linear and it would feel too flat. You really needed that jolt of energy, and you got that right in the middle of the track. Last but not least, Withering Snowdrops, a song that has more of a direct approach, both musically and vocally. This is perhaps one of the most linear tracks on the album. That doesn't mean it's boring, it doesn't mean it's repetitive, it just means that it doesn't have a lot of fluctuations. There's some nuances within it, but there's no peaks and valleys, if you will. The alternating vocal styles is where you see perhaps the biggest change or the biggest difference within the song itself. The guitar sound is very robust, and that also plays into the more direct, straightforward approach. But the vocals is really where the nuances are. Changing between harsh and clean really gives you a sense of a break from one to the other. The saxophone on this track is really interesting, because it works almost as a bridge. It builds into a break that the song has, and the overall construction of the track feels a little bit more complete because of where the saxophone is introduced, what it does, and how it extends the track and what comes afterwards. It makes the overall experience feel less linear, because it's definitely a bleep on the radar, but the song overall still feels like it's very straightforward in its approach. Is an easy song for you to process, even though there are some unbalanced moments within it. This is it, Fractal Universe, The Impassable Horizon, out June 25th on Metal Blade Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.